You are now listening to The Project. To The Project. To The Project. Where we stop at nothing to bring you the right facts on health, fitness, and psychology. Featuring some of the world's most experienced professionals so you can learn, lift, and live. With your hosts, Meg and Mehdi. I guarantee you Snickers sales went up after that. And CrossFitters were like, oh, look, Fraser's, drinking a Coke and, eating a Snickers after what? I'm going to do the same exact thing. And I'm kind of like, dude, that doesn't apply to you. Like, that's Matthew Fraser.
Genetically, we all carry fat in different parts of our body. In order for me to have any abs, I've got to be in such low body fat that my body doesn't perform well, and I've just given up on that because I like food and I like to be able to lift heavy and move fast. So my body naturally has to carry some fat around the belly to be able to move.
All this and more in today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of The Project, and in today's episode we are bringing you munchies and macros. So how'd you come up with that name, just out of curiosity before we get going?
So in terms of like sports performance, obviously macronutrition does matter. And I'm a big eater. Like I'm Thai. So like our entire culture is surrounded by food. Like, and I tell people this, I'm like, in Thailand, when you say, how are you? It's kin khao le yang, which means have you eaten? That is how we greet each other. And food is such a huge part of our culture and like my life. So I thought, well, what can I tie together with sports performance and food? And I thought, well, munchies, because I'm literally eating all the time. So munchies and macros.
It's so true. And we were talking before the show started, and I was telling you that I had a pretty intense workout this morning with a bunch of young guys. I'm 38. One guy's 23. The other guy's 28. So, I got almost 2 decades on one of them. And I'm trying to keep up with them. And since the workout, all I've been doing is just munching on whatever is in front of me. And, we were talking about that your body craves food, especially after a vigorous workout. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because there are a lot of people that are like, no, I just worked out. I don't want to put these calories on. But there's added benefit to actually consuming food.
Yeah, 100%. So a lot of people put their eggs in this sort of like pre-workout basket, if you like. There's sort of like the pre-training, the intra, and the post. And what people don't realize is that when we talk about performance nutrition, essentially the most important part of all of those 3 windows is actually the post-training. So people think that they need to feel before they go in to train. Actually, you need to feel really well after you train so that it gives you enough recovery energy for the next 24 hours. So that essentially when you come into the gym the next day, you then have that energy. So when you think you're tired, it's not necessarily, well, I haven't eaten maybe, an hour before. It's probably you overtrained yesterday or the day before and you didn't fuel your body up enough. So when you say, you're training with these guys and you went back home and you're like, literally give me all of the food, you needed to be fueling your body before, during, and immediately after. And what your body is probably wanting is that glycogen replenishment. So basically loads of carbs if and when you can.
Yeah, no, and that makes total sense. I mean, when you lift a lot of weight, especially, you're using those glycogen stores as essential fuel. And I think people demonize that so much. But one thing that it has been a game changer for me in the last 4 or 5 weeks is doing that immediately after a workout. I have my post-workout shake, so to speak, that is basically sugar, salt, some apple juice. And it's Garden of Life. So it's 1 scoop of that. And plus I add a scoop of protein. Like the taste is totally diluted. I don't even care what it tastes like anymore. I just kind of gulp it down because I know, I know I'm going to feel better. And I think that's really helped me recover a lot faster, especially after these workouts. And it just dawned on me, I never introduced you properly. Sherry Edwards. Sorry. I never said your name at the beginning of the podcast. So I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to dive right into it. So do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what your background is?
So yes, I started this business in the middle of the lockdown, basically. I had to go back to talking about food. I had a Thai food business, and we went into lockdown, and basically I couldn't do anything with food. So I sort of put together 2 things that I have always been very passionate about: food and fitness. I've done sports most of my life, and my sort of background has always been yoga. I've been a yoga teacher for 19 years. at a CrossFitter for about coming up to 6 years. And, those are things that I've always been really, really passionate about. So I got myself certified and just started the business basically. And I realized that there were so many people out there that really needed help in cutting through the noise, because there's just too much nutritional information out there, and too many different styles of diet, and too many, we were talking about like diet warriors. We're like, this is the best diet. This is the best diet. And the truth is that there isn't one single best diet for every single person, because each individual is different. I mean, you've got different body types, you've got different sports.
And I think that is awesome. And that's why when we noticed what you were doing on Instagram and the content that you were producing, and especially on your blog and your website and everything, that you really focus and hone in a lot on performance. And I think that's something people kind of, especially dietitians, and I knock on dietitians a lot, because they don't take those performance factors into consideration a lot of the times. And, you come out and you say it and you talk about it a lot. Now, if we were to have three different types of people, or sedentary person, your average gym goer, and then your CrossFitter or your gym goer that is a somewhat of an athlete or trains like an athlete, what do you think some of the best prescriptions for them would be in terms of the overall volume that they would consume in terms of, macros or calorie intake for, say, your average person, your sedentary person? Well, what should they be eating in terms of macros? Then your gym goer, and then your athlete. What would you kind of recommend? As an athlete, say they train 3 hours. Your normal gym goer, say an hour to an hour and a half. And then obviously your sedentary person, maybe, a walk around the block.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. In fact, I just put out a post using my mom as an example. So say, a 70-year-old woman, she is quite fit for her age, but she doesn't actually train vigorously. So she probably walks somewhere between 3 to 5 miles per day or something. I mean, 5 really being like the absolute maximum. And then you've got, say, maybe my husband, who is like in his mid 40s, that trains 1 to 2 hours a day. So obviously, to be clear, I can't actually prescribe anything as a nutrition coach, but as a recommendation to people of completely different ages and different training styles, you would need to eat completely differently. So, you do get people sort of like bashing the processed food community, where, you're eating processed sugar and you're eating this and that. And I'm just like, actually, it was funny because Matt Fraser did a podcast a while ago with Joe Rogan, didn't he? And he's just like, well, I just eat Snickers. Well, of course you can eat Snickers. And actually, you probably should. Because if you're training at that high intensity and your body is so depleted of glycogen, the fastest thing you should be eating is processed sugar, because it's going to hit your body exactly when you need it. So, as opposed to someone who's like my mother, someone in her 70s, where she will probably just do some housework and do a little bit of walking, I would then recommend brown rice. So do you know what I mean? Like the pattern there is just that it's completely different. You can't tell different groups of people to eat the same type of food, because it just doesn't work that way.
No, that's awesome. And I think I agree with you. And I like that you said brown rice. And would you advise people, especially more of the sedentary type, or the people that aren't really hitting their step counts or their exercises, their exercise time frame per day, to focus more on whole natural foods and, foods that are less processed?
I would say, as a general rule, yes. But I'm also very sensitive to the fact that I feel like society as a whole, and then this is going into a whole different issue now, but I think society as a whole, and I think social media is quite guilty for this as well. You've got the clean eaters and the, you should only eat organic and clean food and this and that. And what that does is that it causes a lot of food anxiety. So yes, in theory, I would say the message is not remove all of the dirty food from your diet, remove all the processed food. It's not. Eat the things that you love, eat the things that you enjoy, but surround them with whole foods. So, it's just being a little bit more sensitive with the way you put the message out there. So yes, if you have more of a sedentary type of lifestyle, I would definitely say eat more whole foods, but it really is never going to be about giving up processed food, because there are loads of processed foods out there that are actually quite good for you. If you think some protein shakes, athletes need to take them, plenty of things out there that are processed. And To talk about the process of food, I mean, things that you do eat grains, sometimes grains are processed anyway.
I think people have become so dogmatic about the diet that they're on. And I love that you talk about that because, I was telling you before the show, the vegans kind of got my old account banned. According to Facebook, I violated community standards because I got into an argument with a vegan. So it's funny how people are jumping on these bandwagons, and it didn't really exist 6 or 7 years ago. It only really started to come to light with social media. And you're very vocal on your account. I love it. I love the reels. I love the content that you produce on there. Do you think social media really plays into that a little bit more and creates these camps where people are attacking each other?
Absolutely. Yeah, you do get purists and you get people who are, a little bit, not going to say self-righteous, but who feel like if they have a certain amount of knowledge, sort of that I'm better than you, which it's hard because I feel like there is a lot of information out there that is also correct, but perhaps shouldn't be said in a way because it is only correct for a specific type of people. So, okay, I'll give you an example. Like keto, for example, can be a really good lifestyle for a specific type of people. So, if you're, say, again, we go back to sedentary lifestyle where you don't do any HIIT training, like the CrossFitting type of stuff where your body clearly needs that HIIT energy, then keto is by all means perfect because you're probably going to be consuming less sugary things, less sweets and donuts and that kind of stuff, which essentially is going to be better. But if you're talking about someone who is going to the gym and they're lifting heavy weights and they're, hitting their 1 rep maxes, they are sprinting, that person following a keto diet is no, it's just one of those things where just because something is correct doesn't necessarily mean it's correct for all of those people.
100%. And honestly, like I tried the keto diet for about, I'd want to say 9 days or 8 days. My performance plummeted. I got the keto flu and it was horrible.
Yeah.
I was just like, look, I've learned that
Yeah.
my body, when I overconsume carbs, I'm very inflamed and it affects my performance. But if I don't consume any carbs, it also affects my performance. So I really have to balance it out. And the only carbs I've been eating since the age group
Yeah.
qualifiers, it was before the age group qualifiers by like 3 weeks. I knew I had 5 weeks to go, 5 weeks to prep. So during those 5 weeks, I was very conscious of every single thing that I put in my mouth. And most importantly, carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And the only carbs I found that worked really well with me were oatmeal and very small amounts of white rice. If I overconsumed white rice, it acted against me. And I could tell that, oh my God, carbohydrates are, sort of working against me, but working for me at the same time. It's funny because everyone's jumping on the keto bandwagon over the last, I'd say like 2 or 3 years. And they think it's going to help their performance. They're going to get more ketones. And it's just like, well, if you do it right, yeah. But if you're not doing it right, it's really going to harm you. Can you talk about some of the disadvantages to the keto diet to some of the people that you've seen firsthand or witnessed some of the things that they've gone through in terms of performance and just overall cognitive ability?
Yeah. So you talk about the keto flu. It's just not a nice experience. So basically, I think our bodies will always revert to trying to turn things into glucose because we need that for energy. So let's go back to really basic. The most dense form of energy is fat. So important. But in sort of modern society, we don't actually need that much fat. So we just need, like if you're going to talk about super basic food portions, each meal is maybe like a thumb size of fat. That's not a lot. And when you think about like modern society and the way that we eat so much fried foods, like cheese and like oils and everything, it all adds up. And obviously when you don't use that energy, as we know, it turns to fats. When we start to sort of drop our carb levels in our body, you get the sort of like first 5 to 6 days where people are like, I'm on a keto diet. I've already lost so much weight. What you have lost is basically water weight. So it's not fat loss because you don't actually lose fat immediately that quickly. You probably will in the first week, but in the first sort of 3 to 4 days, you're probably not losing fat that quickly. If you've lost a pound or two or three or four within the first 2 to 3 days, you've lost water weight, right? So everything sort of wants your body will essentially try to find a way of turning things into glucose. So when you start to drop carbohydrates from your body, your body goes through what we call like ways of creating that. So it goes to your fats. So that's when people are like, oh, but it's actually burning more fats. Well, yes, it's burning fats, but it's actually burning fats from your diet. So it's not actually burning fats within your body. So then, like people going, okay, well, if I can eat the keto diet and I can lose weight as well, that means that I can eat like loads of bacon and loads of cheese and all of that. Then you're going down the route of things that there's a lot of heavily processed foods in there as well, which could potentially cause some issues. And even if we weren't talking about consuming loads of processed foods, we're talking about, if we're talking about sports performance as well, your body really does need the carbs. Our bodies go through sort of 3 energy levels. So the first one is, where our bodies create creatine, basically. So when you take off from a block and your sprint energy comes from carbs, right? But then when you get to the end where you're just literally just trotting, your body starts to run off of fats. So that's when we go back to, if you have a sedentary type of lifestyle, absolutely, you can run off of fats. Amazing. But if you're a high performing athlete where you need to be doing things like super heavy lifts, so like bodybuilders or like power lifters, where you need to be releasing all of those ATPs and creatine and all that, you need carbs in your body. So to answer your question, what are the sort of downsides or downfalls to going into a keto diet and trying to perform well? Well, that's essentially it. If you're trying to power yourself and get loads of immediate energy, fast energy or hit energy, then fats is really not the answer. It's going to be more carbs.
No, and that makes total sense. And you see a lot of people, they're like, oh, I feel so lethargic and whatever when they're on the keto diet. And it's like, yeah, because your body needs something that you're obviously not giving it. And when you do consume a lot of processed foods like, bacon, hot dogs and whatever, your body's going to send an inflammatory response. It's just natural. And, people's sodium levels take off through the roof. Like I had a family member, they're like, yeah, I'm going keto. And then, their hands were swelling up. I was like, dude, how much salt are you getting in? Like, you're probably over consuming, something for your hands to swell up if you got significant bloating. And sure enough, he went and got tested and he was like, yeah, I got to stop keto. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, no.
I think some people fall into that trap, like my mother. And I love that you talk about losing water weight in the first week of it. Like my mom's like, oh yeah, I lost 5 pounds. It was so fast. And I'm like, that's just water weight. You can manipulate that anytime you want. You just have to know how to eat, drink, how much salt to consume and whatever else. Because my wife's a power lifter. So she knows how to play the water weight game way better than me. But let's shift gears a little bit towards, the CrossFit side of things. And you wrote something really cool. And I'd like you to talk about that a little bit in terms of people who will join into CrossFit, they'll lose a little bit of weight, and then, they'll stop losing weight and they'll hit that plateau. Can you talk about that plateau a little bit and how some people can get past that plateau? And I think it applies to a lot of classes, not just CrossFit. It applies to group fitness because it's usually an hour of HIIT or whatever. And, if you can jump into that, that'd be awesome.
I mean, I think there are very many different factors, but I think the main thing is that we know this. There are so many different, I'm going to call them recreational athletes that train and take their training very well, but don't have the physique they want. So there are 2 things going on. There's training for performance, and then there's training for physique, right? I mean, sometimes you do have like a gray area, but essentially if you're going to train for your physique, you're going to have to eat a little bit differently. And what happens is that when you come to something, especially like CrossFit, you're hungry and you're eating loads and loads and loads of food. So instead of being at a maintenance or a deficit, you're essentially in a surplus. So you're either sort of gaining weight or you're not losing weight. When people, I'm speaking from personal experience as well. I don't like to speak about this because I feel like I do shame myself. But the truth of it is that I was a paleo dieter for, this is my yoga background. I don't even know if this is a yoga thing, but I just sort of found paleo. But I was sort of like a cave woman, so to speak, for about 5 years. And I packed on so much weight. And I had gotten at a point where I'd given up everything from like honey. Sometimes I was even refusing to eat any fruit because I was like, oh, that's got sugar. No, I refuse to eat that. And I would just fuel up on kale, coconut oil, peanut butter, almond butter, avocados, and gaining so much weight because I would go to CrossFit and I would smash out a workout, come home, be starving, and eat avocados. So I would basically be building up a backlog of loads of energy and not using it fast enough. So to answer your question, when people do experience that plateau, it could be various things. So it could be the fact that they're too hungry, they're going home and they're eating the wrong things. Or it could be that because a CrossFit session generally is only an hour long and the whole WOD isn't an hour, it usually is like half an hour of, lifting here and there. And the actual like Metcon is like 15 minutes, 20 minutes at the very most. You're not actually burning that much energy. Can you have a great physique on CrossFit? Absolutely. I mean, look at all of these, incredible elite athletes. Yes, you can. You just have to know how to dial in your nutrition. And also it probably the elite athletes that we see that are up there, they're not just doing CrossFit, they are, but they're also bodybuilding. They're also doing, various other things, mobility work. They're training. These guys, the elite guys, are training anywhere between 3 to 5 hours a day anyway. So it's going to be a little bit different to you and I that, are like moms and dads that are raising kids that have other things going on.
No, I know, and I was explaining that to one of my clients the other day. He was like, why am I not losing more weight? And I said, look at the strength gains that you're having right now. You really kind of, yes, you work out vigorously for an hour or, the 20-minute hit session or so to speak, whatever the WOD is. But what are you doing in the other, 23 hours or 23 hours and 20 minutes, so to speak? And you're right. It's so important to look at that. And I'm one of those guys. I'm a dad. I have a full-time job. I do CrossFit. I try to take it as seriously as I can, but, let's be realistic. Someone asked me, they're like, why is your body not like his body? I said, look, I have a lot to worry about in life. The last thing I can worry about is nutrition. I care about my training and performance first.
Yep.
And then nutrition is something that I have to rely on people in my household, like my wife, my mother.
To feed you, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And, my mother, God bless her, she's making, pasta alla Nor and all kinds of stuff. And it's like,
yeah, and you're going to eat it because it tastes amazing.
Exactly. I'm going to eat it. It tastes amazing. And my mom's like, she's the type where it's like, oh, you're not eating enough. And then like, I'll finish off like an entire bowl and she'll be like, I don't know how you eat like that. You're gluttonous. I'm like, what? Like, you just said I don't eat enough.
Yeah.
But that's me. I absolutely love food. And people always say, especially nutritionists, dietitians, and coaches, you have to have a good relationship with food. I feel like I have a great relationship with food. Me and food love each other. It's one of those things that I don't feel like I have a bad relationship with food because I actually enjoy it, and it's something that I know it fuels my body. And there are times where I look at my mom and I'm like, look, Ma, I just need to eat to fuel right now. It's not, and I know how to put those brakes on, but it's,
yes.
Do you think people demonize that factor so much where they're saying, hey, you have a bad relationship with food, you really got to look at it this way or that way? I mean, can't we just like food? Isn't that one of the things that we should enjoy in life because it's so connective in a way?
Yeah, I don't think I could have said that any better. I think that is the perfect way of looking at it. We all need to enjoy food. So again, we go to eating for performance. If you want to perform better, you literally need to eat food, right? The more energy you have in your body, the better you're going to perform. It's when people start eating for physique, that's completely different. When you start eating for physique, that's when you start focusing on the bathroom scale. And you're, weighing yourself every day going, well, why am I not losing weight? And then you start picking your body apart and then you start demonizing food. Or worse, you eat clean, which is what some people do. From Mondays through to Fridays, they're like, oh, I have a perfect diet. I eat just fish and broccoli and this and that. And I get to Friday and they literally just hit a wall and they're like, I want the Twix, the Doritos, everything, because they've cut it out from their diets.
Yeah.
So the most important thing I feel as working from, mindset, and this is one of the things that I really, really hone into as a coach is you need to work on your mindsets and you need to work on your behaviors and your habits, because if you don't start with the mind and you don't try to fix either relationship you have with food or the relationship you have with your body, all of the science to do with nutrition is completely pointless, because you get to the end of the 12-week program or 6 weeks or whatever, you have, banging body and you've got a six-pack. Well, if you haven't fixed your relationship with food, you're literally going to be exactly the same position. So, what's your body going to look like after the 12-week plan when you've got abs, and then say maybe 4 weeks after that? Because if you haven't worked on, fixing your relationship, so we're talking about learning how to portion control, learning how to eat a balanced diet, not giving up Twix or Doritos, the things that you love, understanding that it is okay to eat those things every once in a while. Don't completely try to shut it out and cut it from your diet, because if you cut it out from your diet, the first thing you're going to want to do when you get to the end of your diet is to eat that. I had a gentleman who came to me and said, right, I want to lose weight. He's quite active. He does Peloton and all of that. And I said, okay, great. The first thing he said was, I want to give up beer for 12 weeks. And I said, don't do that. Because if beer, this gentleman would drink maybe about 3 to 5 times a week anyway, which is not a big deal. And I said, if your body is habitually used to drinking beer about 3 to 5 times a week and you love it, but then you give it up, all of a sudden just go cold turkey for about 12 weeks, what do you think is going to be the first thing you reach for when you get to the end? And then you've just undone all of that progress. So, balance it out. I think balance is the best way of putting it. Just eat the things that you enjoy. Don't restrict anything, but learn to balance, learn to tap into your natural hunger cues, natural fullness cues, and listen to your body.
I love that. And it makes me reflect and think. And I know myself, and I know that I do most of my damage during the weekend, because that's when I have the least control also. And
We all do.
And, I got a kid. So when he's like, Daddy, I want to eat Blaze, or, Daddy, I want Pizza Express, or I want, so-and-so food. I mean, we don't really eat, fast food, but we'll have like the pizza or the whatever, and that's his like weekly treat or whatever. Yeah. And when he gets a pizza, I'm the one getting, all right, give me a large pepperoni. And, I'll down it like it's going out of business, because I restrict myself all week. Yeah. And I get to the weekend and things are uncontrollable anyways, because I don't know where I'm going, what I'm doing, where I'm dropping my kid off, grandparents' house or whatever. Yeah. You go to the grandparents' house and they got food set up and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm the type of person where if you put a bowl of Reese's in front of me, I'm going to grab a couple. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh no, I'm going to restrict myself and, Yeah. And then at the same time, I don't feel bad about it anymore. There was a time where I would feel guilt. And I'm sure you've dealt with people that have that guilt after they eat something. And
absolutely. Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit? You've mentioned it a few times on your page. And can you dive into that? Because I think people really beat themselves up so badly. And it's not a shame when you indulge a little bit into foods you like.
Yeah. So I think there's a famous quote by Dr. Evelyn Tribble, I think her name is, she said, there is no such thing as food guilt unless you murder the chef, right? Just eat the food. Let's just think about the facts now, right? Because people like to label food as good food and bad food. And I think social media is so guilty for this. There is no such thing as good food and bad food. There is literally just food. Factually, food is just energy for your body. It might not be the kind of energy that you might need for your specific goals. So if you wanted to lose weight, maybe a Snickers bar isn't going to help you, but it's not bad food, right? Food is literally just food. So to answer your question, when people come to me and they do need that relationship with their bodies fixing or a relationship with food, the first thing we have to talk about is you need to stop labeling food as good and bad. It's to understand that you can eat anything you want to eat. If you want to eat a cookie, eat the cookie. If you want to eat a pizza, eat the pizza. It's the mentality of saying you cannot eat that makes you want to eat it, because we're humans and that's what we want to rebel. You tell me I can't eat the pizza, well, I want to eat the pizza. As soon as you tell your body you can eat anything you want, it's almost like, oh, well, if I can eat whatever I want, then I guess I'll just not worry about it, right? So yeah, that is essentially the very core of it. Learning to understand that you don't have to give your body permission to eat. Just eat it. And, our bodies, most people anyway, who come to me don't need to lose weight. If they come to me and they want to perform better, absolutely, I can help them. Usually it's a case of you need to eat more food and you need to carb cycle so that you can recover immediately after you train. But the people who come for help in terms of physique, most of them might not have the body fat percentage that they want, but they're not unhealthy. And there is this movement on in society that goes, if you don't have a six pack or if you don't have amazing delts, you're not healthy. I cannot call the biggest bullshit ever. It is literally so damaging to people. What, if you don't have a set of abs, you're suddenly not healthy? The word in the opposite as well. People who have incredibly lean body mass that have very low body fat can be unhealthy as well. And people who have lots of body fat can be very healthy. So your health is not determined by the way you look at all. And this is where, it's so misunderstood. And that is what causes a lot of food anxiety, food guilt, that kind of stuff.
100%. I love that you say that because, you take me, there are trainers that I know and coaches and other athletes like me. And if you stand me next to some of these guys who are shredded with a six pack and everything, to the naked eye, they'd be like, yeah, this guy over here, he performs better. When in reality, I dance circles around some of these guys. And I love it because I'll throw down with them in wads here and there. And it's like, the guys at these gyms, the ones that were sort of the doubters, so to speak, are like, holy shit, this guy's really good. And it's, they think the six pack paints such a big picture and, the big muscle bellies and everything. And, this is a guy that can only back squat 100 kilos versus, someone like me with 150 kilo back squat or 180 kilos back squat. And it's amazing how social media has really kind of done that and painted that picture. And it's just gotten so blown out of proportion these days. But what do you say to the people that will say, oh, I had a cheeseburger today. I need to do an extra class to burn off an extra 500 calories. And they're sitting there with their watch and they're like, I only got 2 more 100 calories to burn. Maybe I'll go and do this yoga class. What do you say to those people? Because it seems like now with the metrics that we get from our watches, it's blowing out of proportion these days. And, I looked at one of the guys at the gym. I go, dude, A, that's not accurate. And B, you could go and do that class, but you're not going to burn the calories from that cheeseburger. And he's like, huh? I'm like, yeah, that's how it works. So
you're so right. Like, first of all, I think there's two things going on there. First, it's the fact that your smartwatch or whatever it is that you have is so inaccurate anyway. And the fact that people believe this. So that's another issue as well. Like looking at it thinking, well, I've just walked 5 miles or whatever. I've burnt 1,000 calories. I'm like, I don't think you have. So depending on that, again, can be quite like misleading. The other thing is when you're saying people kind of eat a burger and they feel like they have to like punish themselves. Well, here's the thing. If you ate really terribly, let's just say you ate burgers and pizzas every single day for 7 days straight. And then on day 8, you ate kale for the rest of the day. That day isn't going to make a difference. So think about it in reverse. If you ate pretty well and all of a sudden you just smashed a burger, no big deal. It is not going to like completely destroy or damage your progress. People think that they sort of like blow things out of proportion. They think, okay, I've done really well. I've eaten really well. And all of a sudden they have a slice of pizza and they're like, no, they think that they're suddenly going to gain all this weight. If you step on the scales the following day and you've gained weight, it probably is sodium. It probably is water weight. Don't panic. The worst thing you can do is panic, feel guilty, binge some more because you think, well, I've fallen off the wagon now. That's the worst thing you can do. Just get over it. Whatever you eat, don't feel guilty. Just say, I wanted to eat that, walk away from it, move on.
No, 100%. I love that you mentioned the key words of, binging and falling off the wagon. And so many people will say to me, they're like, oh, but, I already screwed up this weekend. So I'm just going to continue what's going on right now. And that just kind of makes it a lot worse. So, I mean, you've seen it from both perspectives. What about the athletes? How bad is it with some of the athletes?
I think it depends on the individual. You do have two types of athletes that come, people that really do take their performance seriously. And this is very interesting when you look at the psychology, because people who genuinely care about their performance do very well with the task, because they're willing to work on the mindset, they're willing to eat their vegetables, they're willing to just balance out their diet and know when to eat fun foods and when to eat better foods. When you compare that to people who are just doing the program and more focused on the physique, they are harder on themselves and they tend to either be black or white. So either eat really well and then all of a sudden feel like they're falling off the wagon. So I think the psychology there is that if you focus on the performance and things that have more value than just a set of abs, the results are more sustainable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it makes a big difference. When you talk about the performance of things, you just recently had a post a couple days ago, I think, in regards to, normal white potatoes versus your sweet potatoes, and how people are like, oh, don't eat potatoes, just focus on the sweet potatoes. And I love that post because everyone talks about it. They're like, oh, you're eating white potatoes. I'm the type of person where I have a baked potato at least 3-4 times a week. And I love it. I'll have a steak and a baked potato. That's like my go-to meal. And can you kind of, just talk about that a little bit? The difference between the white potato, the sweet potato, and how beneficial potatoes are for you in general?
I think the most important thing to think about is the fact that I love to say this. When people are like, which one is better for me? I'm like, the one you like the taste of. Like, literally. If you have different goals and all of that, it is, yeah. I mean, it's like, if you like white potatoes, eat white potatoes. The misleading thing is that, and I think this may have started from the sort of paleo movement that, sweet potatoes were better. They're, well, better for who? That's sort of always the question that I like to ask. Better for someone who just likes the taste of it better? There's like the carb content is different. The protein content is different. You do get people saying, well, white potatoes don't have any nutrients. Well, they actually do. Factually, they do. When you put them side by side, it's not one is better than the other. They are literally just different. And it's funny you say that because that post on whole grains versus refined grains. So that's another one as well. People say, well, brown rice is better than white rice. And I'm like, well, the question is, who are you talking about, right? So, I'll go back to Matt Fraser. Whether this is true or not, I don't know. But I read a blog once that said that Matt Fraser eats white rice, just literally white rice all the time. And that does not surprise me at all. Because white rice, because it is refined, is going to release faster in your body. Therefore, he's going to get that glycogen replenishment faster than brown rice. And he needs it because he's training 5 hours a day. So yeah, that's just one of the differences where you need to look at the facts of food as opposed to opinions, because what my mother will eat, I would recommend her to eat something different to what I eat.
I love that you talk about that and you talk about the differences between people and everyone. Do you know who Tom Brady is by any chance? The quarterback or ex-quarterback of the Patriots. He is, he's 42 years old. It's rumored that he'll only have ice cream like once a year, and it's avocado ice cream, or sorry, once a week he'll have avocado ice cream, and he only eats, I think it's nightshades or not. He doesn't eat any nightshades, and, he has a very restrictive diet, and they're like, oh, this is the secret, to youthfulness. And I tell my friends, I'm like, dude, he probably spends like $3-4 million a year on his recovery. And that's probably what makes the biggest difference. And, his diet, yeah, it's probably dialed in, but he's a high level athlete. And, just like with Matthew Frazier, you were talking about how he'll eat a Snickers bar after his workout. I guarantee you Snickers sales went up after that just because he said that. And CrossFitters were like, oh,
right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
Look, Frazier's eating, drinking a Coke and, eating a Snickers after the what? I'm going to do the same exact thing. And I'm kind of like, dude, that doesn't apply to you. Like, that's Matthew Frazier. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
you're the dude at the gym, man. And can you talk about those differences? Because genetics plays a huge factor.
Yeah.
And, I got my body fat down to 7% and I went through hell. It sucked. Like, it totally sucked.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Life sucked at that time because it was like a hyper diet, and I was so cautious about everything I was putting in my mouth. And even when I got to 7%, I still had like this little wedge of, belly fat that just wouldn't go away, and it was just that extra skin or whatever. And it was only at that time where I was looking in the mirror and I was like, dude, I don't even care anymore. I just want to work out and do what I like. And I turned towards strongman after that.
Yeah.
And then I found my love for CrossFit, which I've grown to hate more and more every day. But it's true, though, because I love to hate CrossFit, and I'm sure you can relate to it. You start the WOD 3 minutes into it or 2 minutes into it.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, why the hell am I doing this again?
Yeah.
Remind me,
exactly.
why am I doing a run and then, 20 snatches afterwards? It just doesn't make sense. So can you talk about the genetic differences that play from person to person and the intuitive eating that goes along with it to try to figure out what works well with your body?
Yeah. So it's interesting you're asking that because I'm so glad you brought this up. People think that they look at Instagram influencers that, and I do the same. You look at beautiful women, beautiful men that have gorgeous bodies, and you're like, I want that, right? What people don't realize is that there's so many different things at play. So either they're elite athletes and they train like crazy anyway. You look at that and then you look at yourself and you begin to pick yourself apart. And when I have to work with people who are so hard on themselves, what I can see is that people don't understand the science, you want to call it, eating for physique, is that genetically we all carry fat in different parts of our body. And I have had to learn that myself the hard way. So I'll use me as a perfect example. My body fat has to be like practically non-existent for me to have any abs whatsoever. I have long given up on that. I'm just like, you know what? I've got delts. I'm just going to use my delts, right? I have toned arms, but I carry a lot of fat around my belly, and that is my body genetically. In order for me to have any abs, I've got to be in such low body fat that my body doesn't perform well. And I've just given up on that because I like food and I like to be able to lift heavy and move fast. So my body naturally has to carry some fat around the belly to be able to move. And then you've got, say, person A who comes in who may carry some fat around their arms, but has a six pack. And they may look at me and say, well, I want arms like yours, because we all carry fat genetically in different places. So when you see things that say, detox your arms, do like a mud wrap or green tea, wrap it here and there, and you're going to lose fat, you're literally just going to waste your money, or you're just going to be lied to, because it is all literally about how you train, how you eat, and what your parents gave you, because a lot of it is genetics that you just have to sort of accept, and it's hard. It's hard to swallow that, because it took me a long time for me as well to accept my body and say, you know what? I will never have abs like some of the women that I, love to follow on social media. It's just not what my body can do. I can achieve it, but to achieve that, I will also not be able to lift as heavy as I can now. So it's a fine balance. What are you going to prioritize? Are you going to prioritize physique? In which case, that's absolutely fine. No one has the right to judge you. But if you want performance, your body needs to be in that happy place. So whatever that is, you might have some more fat around your hips, more fat around your arms or your belly. So be it. That is what it has to be. And, we go back to Matt Fraser. Do you remember he said that in the Buttery Bros video where they said, well, what do you want to do? When you're done with CrossFit, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to eat to look like I'm fit. Well, Jesus, the man is already fit, right? But he understands there is a huge difference between eating for physique and eating for performance.
Yeah. It makes total sense. And it's like, I know if for me personally, like I've done everything I could for my legs and they just will not grow. Like my calves will just never grow.
You sound like my husband. He says that.
And it's funny you say the genetic factor, because then I look at my father, who's, probably 6'4". My mother's short. I get it. I get my shortness from her. But my father's like 6'4". Yeah, he's a hefty guy. He's a big boy. He eats a lot. So he's just top heavy. And then he has these scrawny little legs. And it's like, that's where I get it from. That's who I have to blame. And I know it. Yeah. And it's like, everyone always says it, like the people that my old friends and stuff, when they see me after a long time, like, dude, you need to do some legs. And I'm like, if you only knew, man, how many times I squat, how many times I squat a week and, all the friggin' double unders and everything. It's not in the cards
Yeah.
for me to have big calves or big legs. And the sooner I think people will understand that, the better. And I still get caught in that, wormhole of having the physique in the body. And, I'll right now, because I'm being more vigilant on my performance, I see my six pack start to show a little bit, and, I'll see it in the videos. And I found myself a week ago, I was getting caught up in it. Like, all right, now I really want to get that six pack. And then I was like, wait a minute. If I do that, I'm going to sacrifice so much on the weights that I'm lifting because my body actually needs some fat to
Yeah.
protect my joints
Yeah.
and to protect myself. And I learned that 3 or 4 years ago when I tore my labrum. That was when I was around 7% body fat and I was trying to lift heavy weights. And I just think I was malnourished, to be honest with you. And it played a huge factor. But I think women see it very differently. And I like what you said about, the body fat percentage and everything, because, there are a lot of women out there that want that six pack and they want to go through that, but they don't understand how badly it will screw up their hormones. And I know this because I knew a lot of girls that tried to go for it, and, they had eating disorders and they would go 3 months without their periods. Their hormone level would just be all over the place. Can you talk about that a little bit and sort of, the stigma that's been placed on that for women, and that it's okay to look the way you look?
Absolutely. Like women, I mean, gone are the days where, having curves like Marilyn Monroe is beautiful, like, and she still is, right? You look at pictures of her and you're like, wow, she's beautiful. But for whatever reason, we all want the shredded look now because of this misunderstanding that if you don't have a six pack, that if you aren't, shred, you aren't healthy. And people want that sort of, they want that badge, don't they? They want I have delts, I have abs, therefore I am healthy and I am strong. It couldn't be more misleading or inaccurate. I'm carrying so much more body fat than I am. I mean, I'm the strongest I've ever been, really. I've spent basically the last 6 to 9 months building as much muscle mass as possible. And in the process of building muscle mass, I've had to be in a surplus. In the process of being in a surplus, I've had to gain loads of fat. So I have more muscle, but I also have more fat. So it's like a double-edged sword. It's like, you can't really have it all. But it's understanding that if you want, whatever physique it is that you want, you're going for the delts or the toned legs or the abs, you have to drop to very low levels of body fat. This is the question I ask. How much of your mental health are you willing to sacrifice to look a specific way? I think that's sort of the most important question to ask yourself.
100%. That's an awesome answer. And I just want to preface this because if my wife listens to the episode, she's going to yell at me and say, what do you know about female hormones? And I know absolutely nothing. So I want to get that out there. I went on stories that I've been told from friends, back in the day. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you a couple questions about what you do for your athletes. And you've talked about masters athletes in some of your posts, and, the difference, and I think every young athlete doesn't realize they're going to be a master at some point. They don't get that. They think, I'm not going to be that guy at 38 who's talking about the aches, the pains, getting out of bed and finding it hard to walk in the morning, which is me. But, I talk to these young kids and like, oh, no, that's not me. I'll be all right. And dude, no, you're not going to be all right. But what could you say to those young athletes, how they should treat their nutrition right now if they are full-time athletes? And what would you say to the guys that are currently in that master's level? Because life changes and your body, your macros. I could eat stuff a month ago that had a different effect on my body, now. And that's where I was talking about intuitive eating earlier, that now every month I just got to figure out what's kind of jiving well in terms of my body chemistry. So what would you say to these two types of athletes, to manage their performance and manage their life a little bit from that perspective?
I think bottom line is, without sounding like my mother, a balanced diet, right? Restricting too much, let's just say, is not going to be great. So anything that is sort of like the paleo, keto, or, some clean eaters where they refuse to eat anything that is not organic, that kind of stuff. When you refuse to eat anything, let's just say anything, you start to restrict your diet too much, you are essentially, potentially, I should say, cutting out groups of micronutrients from your diet. So balance out your diet as much as you can. For the younger athletes, I would definitely say whatever you feel now that you're sort of, on the top of the world, you still have to be very careful because obviously we all age, don't we? And you do get jokes of people saying, well, when you hit 30, things change. I mean, like when you hit 40 and 50, think about that, right? Your body totally is going to change. You're talking about your joints. And if you're spending, years and years like smashing it out in the gym without warming up, I think you are absolutely going to notice that. So as a coach, as a nutrition coach, like I don't just talk people through the science of nutrition. It really, a lot of it is, we go, are you doing your mobility work? Are you doing your yoga? How many hours of sleep are you getting? Are you on the computer or on your screen and then going straight to bed? Or do you get that 10 minutes of sort of downtime before you go to bed? So it really is just, like so many different factors that you have to bring into your life. And for the masters athletes, I would say the main thing is slow down, right? So this is me speaking from personal experience. From years ago when I thought if I train twice a day, if I train 5 times a week, I'm going to have the body I want. I mean, that body never came. Come on. Now I train 4 times a week. I take days off and I do take a midday off in the week. So I do the Monday, Tuesday, I take a break on Wednesday. And then I'm just so much more careful with how I move my body. When I feel the tiniest niggle of some sort of injury, I stop. I don't take it to max anymore. I make sure that I get my sleep. I make sure that I get my mobility work in. Like all of these things are going to make a huge difference. And if you're concerned too much about what you're eating or the bad foods and all of that, and again, we go back to the basics. The fun foods that you eat aren't going to damage your body as long as you aren't eating overly processed foods and all the time. It's about surrounding those processed foods with a lot of whole foods. It's not about subtracting the processed food. It's about adding more whole foods. That's all it is.
I love it because Meg always says it's not about subtracting from your plate. It's about adding to your plate with the whole foods. Same exact thing. Yeah. I mean, we've said that on this show for 2 years now. Now, real quick, before we do wrap up, what food or what nutrient would you say has been a game changer for you? I mean, personally for me, I know what has changed over the last month for me that I've added to my diet and, what I've been consuming more of. What about for you? What's been a game changer for you and your athletes, something that maybe people overlook a lot of the time?
Such a good question. And I don't think yet there's been a single person that I have coached that has not said this has been an absolute game changer. And this has been true for me as well, is glucose. People are like, wait, are you actually telling me to eat sugar? I'm like 100%. But we're talking recreational athletes though. So I wouldn't just tell my mother to go drink pure sugar. So 100% glucose. So literally just sugared powder in water. Drink that as you're training and that's going to keep you going. It literally is liquid gold. Everyone since people come onto the program, they're like, oh my God, I'm getting all these PRs. I'm like, because your body isn't absolutely depleted by the time you get to the end of the class. These are people that train 2-3 hours a day. I'm like, well, by the time you get to the end of it, if you're not replenishing the glycogen levels, well, of course your body is going to be tired. So glucose, 100%. That's just been an absolute game changer for me and for the people that I coach.
It's funny you say that because last week I had 4 Starbursts before I trained and I was on somewhat of an empty stomach. I hadn't eaten. I was out with my kid all day. So I was like, DJ, what do you got in your bag, dude? And I just grabbed 4 Starbursts, and I ate them on my way to the gym. And I'm like, holy shit, where did all this energy come from? Like, what's going on here? And it literally sustained me all the way to the end of my workout. I was like, it could not have just been eating 4 Starbursts. And since then, before my workouts, I'm not eating Starbursts. But I am having glucose. I'm having sugar. I'm having something, mid-workout too. Like I've added Gatorade back in. I dilute mine in water just because I think it just tastes way too sweet now.
Yeah.
But I dilute it a little bit in water and, my performance has definitely changed. So yeah, I mean, that's an awesome thing to add. And it's another thing that people demonize. And I love that you bring that up. And I love that you talk about these things because we need more nutrition coaches like you out there to sort of guide people rather than giving, I went to a dietitian. They recommended this dietitian to me. They gave me 2,000 calories a day and I told them how I work out they basically totally cut out all my carbohydrates. I lasted 2 or 3 days on this, and it was like all foods that I absolutely hated too. And I was like, dude, I was
Oh
like, this is
no.
bullshit. I was like, this person just copy pasted bullshit off the internet, and like, you're telling me they studied like 8 years to tell me to eat salmon? Like, I hate salmon. I'm not going to eat this shit. And I told them beforehand I don't like fish, but they had put it in my meal plan. And it was just one of those things where I'm
Yeah.
looking at it and I'm like, you're literally just kind of sending out like a cookie cutter program to everyone that, comes and visits you versus actually dialing it in towards that person. And I think when you have a nutrition coach versus a dietitian, they're two different approaches, especially a nutrition coach that is an athlete. I think that makes a huge difference versus the average dietitian that's seeing, my mom, for instance, who says, I see a lot of these diet plans that they get and it's like 900 calories. I'm like, you can't live on 900 calories. And I can't believe what's going on in the market right now. Do you guys have that over in the UK, or is it just something that's localized here in the Middle East?
I don't know. I did hear of there was a lady that I did speak to. She was not a client. She was one of the mums in our school. She said that she was doing this this green shake diet where she was consuming 800 calories a day, and it was hard for me to not like. I really had to like bite my tongue, and I was like, oh, okay, because I cannot imagine. I mean, to be fair, she wasn't a recreation athlete. She was an athlete, but I just can't imagine that 800 calories every day is going to be good. I mean, like every once in a while, somebody was to eat 800 calories because they're busy. Fine, that's not going to do damage. But if you're talking about 7 days straight, I would not recommend that. Probably not a good idea.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Just like the guys that go on the juice diets, I don't understand that at all. I had a
Yeah.
friend, he was on the juice diet, and I've actually had 3 or 4 friends on the juice diet, and all of them, I've seen them fall off the wagon. And I'll just sit there, and I know this is bad, but I'll just kind of laugh, and I'm like, dude, I could have told you that was going to happen, man. I knew one guy, he lasted like 30 hours, and he just couldn't.
Yeah.
He just couldn't do it. I mean, I was looking at, I'm like, dude, like all you're doing is drinking a fluid. You're not getting anything out of it. It's like, no, I'm going to lose so much weight and I'm still getting all the nutrients I need. I'm like, what about fiber, man? Like, what about, something that you're not just going to get from that liquid form? But, thank you for coming on. Definitely knowledge bombs galore today. Where can people find you the most and what can you offer people and how can they contact you?
So Instagram would be a perfect place to contact me because I'm most active on my Instagram. So what can I offer people? Basically, what we're talking about. So a personalized nutrition plan, basically. So I work with masters athletes or recreational athletes that want to perform better and that want to change their physique as well. We'll just look at how to eat, mealtime specifically, how to carb cycle. So honing into those numbers, your carbs, your protein, your fats, that kind of stuff, and figuring out what time of the day you train and when you should be eating so that you can basically get the energy back so that you can recover enough for the following day. So that's what I do. And obviously it's not just the science behind that, but the coaching is more than that. It's more about working on your mindset as well and just coaching people, helping them figure out like when they need to rest and sleep and do the mobility work as well.
That's awesome. So you include the mobility in there. So you're a very hands-on coach, I'm assuming. You're probably one of those coaches that will yell at me if I'm like, yeah, I didn't do my mobility today. I mean, my coach already does that. He does a good job at that. So, but I mean, when you talk about carb cycling, what does that involve exactly?
So it's looking at, so we always start with a person's calorie, what their goals are. So do you want to be in a surplus? Do you want to gain weight? Do you want to maintain or do you want to lose? Then we figure out your calories. Then we figure out your macro split depending on your sport, the volume of training, your body type. Then we take all of that into consideration. We take your carbs and we figure out how much you should be eating in the pre, in the intra, and in the post. So we talk about the pre, you can do, say, like an apple or a piece of toast or something to keep you going. And then the intra, I always recommend people do, we were talking about glucose. And then in the post, which is going to be the most important meal of the day after training, basically, I tell people exactly how to hit those numbers. And that essentially is going to give them enough energy to recover for the day after that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. We'd love to have you back on, definitely.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It was great.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. You can also find us on Instagram at The Project Thank You, and join us next time.